Yo, what's up guys? If you recall, I posted a video not that far long ago where I talked about how to mod your weapons to do the best damage you possibly can. Today, I wanted to look at Warframes and do the same thing where I go in depth about the stats and talk about it with you guys and explain how every stat works and how to mod your Warframe properly. Okay, so I might use Nyx for this example. I'll swap around to the other Warframes just to, like, give you different like options and like how everything works. Let's go into our stats, shall we? You will see this screen. It's pretty self-explanatory, but normally if you hover over everything, it will tell you what everything does. But health, pretty self-explanatory. When this runs out, your character dies. Having a lot of it is useful, but not always. Okay, another stat that goes hand in hand with health is armor. Health is your health. Armor reduces the damage you take. So having high health and high armor increases your effective health points. So even if you have like 1,000 health, instead of needing 1,000 damage to, you know, before your character sees the afterlife, if you have like, let's say 2,700, right? So if you have 2,700 armor, which is exactly the amount you need for 90% damage reduction, instead of that 1,000 damage one-shotting you from 1,000 health, that 1,000 damage do 90% less. So now it'll take 10 of those 1,000 damage attacks to end you, right? When you're doing health tanking, you want to think about your armor as well and not just high health. Oh my god, 1,000,000 health, 3,000 health, and so on, you know. So you want these two together. The one in between that I skipped over right now was shields. Shields have a built-in damage reduction that's not affected by armor. So even if you had 3,000 armor and got like insane amount of damage reduction, it would not affect your shields and only health, which is why armor is pretty much useless unless you're doing a health tank build, and only like a handful of frames can health tank efficiently, right? Those shields are able to recharge. So if you take damage and you go a couple seconds without taking damage, your shields start to recharge. Your health cannot heal back up unless you have an ability that is healing you. Oberon's renewal is able to heal him. He's able to health tank because if you don't have a way to heal, health tank can eventually just get whittled down and die, right? So you want a way to heal with health tanking. Shields, you don't need that. Another good thing about shields is when they break, you have a couple seconds of invulnerability. That duration of invulnerability is dependent on how many max shields you have, right? So for example, if you look at our window right here, it says on shield break, become invulnerable for 1.5 seconds or until shields begin to recharge. If I go to this other build where I have 1,300 shields, if I hover over it, my invulnerability is now 2.5 instead of 1.5. So the more shields you have, the higher or longer that invulnerability timer is. That is relevant when you want to shield gate. So pretty much every Warframe in the game, with the exception of, I believe, 3 Warframes, Nidus, Inaros, and Kalervo. I don't think I'm missing anybody, but every Warframe except those 3 are able to shield gate because they have shields. So what that means is when you take damage, let's say you have 400 shields and I took an attack that did 10,000 damage, right? Normally in this state, that would one-shot me, but because of my shields, I would go to my shields will get destroyed. I'll have 1 seconds where I just can't take damage. And the strategy normally is during that time, you need a way to regen your shields. So there's a few ways. I'm not going to go over them right now, but there's certain mods like brief respite. So whenever you cast an ability, 150% of the energy spent on that ability will be turned into shields. So there's this mod, Augur Set does the exact same thing. And certain abilities have shield regen built in, right? That's how shields work. Hopefully that explained it to you. Next up is energy. So what energy does is required for casting abilities. That's pretty much it. The more energy you have, the more abilities you can cast. So for example, we have 225 and my 4 costs 75 energy. So I can cast this no problem. If I had max energy, I can spam it. I can spam my 3. My 3 also costs 75. So if I spam it 3 times, 4 times, I should be fine. There is situations where you want max energy. For example, quick thinking is a mod that will turn your energy bar into like an extra health bar. So in that situations, you want more energy. Also, if you do some mods that decrease certain stats, your abilities might cost more. So instead of chaos costing 75 energy, it could cost me 120, 130. And in that situation, I might want more energy to be able to cast more abilities. So you got to think about your build sometimes and can I go more energy? Do I even need energy in my casting abilities? Am I not? Like, am I spamming? Am I casting here and there? Is my efficiency too high or too low? and so on. So this is stuff to think about. But after this, these are your 4 main ones. Every Warframe has these. These don't really matter as much as you might think. Certain Warframes do care about these, but most don't. One thing to keep in mind is that these stats, when you go prime, so from a normal Warframe to a prime Warframe, these are the only ones that change: your health, shield, armor, energy, and sprint speed. Sprint speed is self-explanatory. You just sprint faster, so I'm not going to mention that. But every prime Warframe does get slightly higher sprint speed, and then when a Warframe gets 2 out of these 4 get a slight increase. Again, this doesn't normally matter, but for example, somebody like Hildren, whose shield is your health bar and your energy bar, because Hildren doesn't have energy, she instead uses her shield as a resource to cast her abilities. So for her, increasing her shields by a lot is a big buff because you can survive better, and do with a certain mod she has, you can also do more damage. But we're not going to talk about Hildren right now specifically, just on like base average Warframe, right? So these self-explanatory, we went over them, make sense. If you have any questions about these main stats, let me know in the comments. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. You can also check the wiki, like for example, armor, if you want to calculate your damage reduction. It's useful if you do health tanking. If you don't even worry about armor. But next up is abilities. This is probably like it's the main ones, 100%, like when you do builds, but not all of them are important. So you might think like, oh, I need this all to be 400%. Impossible. If you want to get all these at 200%, forget about it. Impossible. Well, for now, it's impossible, right? So what do these do? Duration is self-explanatory. The more duration you have, the longer your abilities last. So for example, I have an ability on here called Chaos. So if you look at the stats of Chaos, we have Drain, Radius, Duration, and Status Effect per enemy. A stat there called Duration, and it's at 25 seconds. So you have to think, is 25 seconds useful to me? Like, is that long enough? The answer could be no. Okay, so there's a mod I have called Prime Redirection. This will give me 55% duration. I don't have it maxed out. I like to keep it at 50. But if I throw this in here, that 25 seconds on Chaos, if you hover over it, is now 37.5. Now we just wasted a mod slot to go from 25 to 35 seconds. That choice is on you if you think it's worth it. Now let's take this back out and let's look at Psychic Bolts. Psychic Bolts has a debuff duration of 15 seconds. If we throw in Prime Continuity, that 15 seconds goes to 22 seconds. To me, that feels a little bit more useful, but to others, it might not. Let's remove it one more time and look at another ability I have, Aqua Blades. So this ability is from Ureli, and I have it subsumed onto Nyx for a certain build I had going on. But if you look at Aqua Blades, it has a 45-second duration, which is longer than the rest. But if I throw it Prime Continuity on, it goes from 45 seconds to 67.5 seconds. So you have to like think about, do you want like the long ability duration to go even higher, or do you want the short one to go up slightly? Because it is a percentage of that base duration. For example, Absorb, our duration's 5 seconds. So with Prime Continuity in there, we're not going to jump to 15 seconds, 20 seconds. If we look at it, we went from 5 seconds to 7.5 seconds. So we gained 2.5 seconds. For one whole mod slot or 2.5 seconds, I don't find it to be value, but if you do, 100% go for it. There's other mods like you can fully commit to duration, and that's 5 seconds. Now it's 18.8, right? 13.8, right? So you could fully commit to duration and go crazy. And like this went from 45 seconds to a minute and a half. I don't think it's super useful to go from 6 seconds and waste 3 mod slots to go up to 13. Unless that ability is the main one you're using and the main one you care about, I wouldn't like focus on it too heavily. Next one we have is efficiency. So again, you can hover over all of these and it'll tell you exactly what they do. But efficiency essentially determines how much your abilities cost. So at 100%, which is the base, my abilities cost their base amount. If I throw in something like Blind Rage, which it decreases my efficiency by 50, if I hover over Chaos that costed 75, it now costs 112, which is why I mentioned earlier about managing your energy. If you want high energy or low energy or energy regen or none of that stuff, your efficiency has a big part to play in that, right? So let's say I want the strength, right? But I want to play around Chaos. I want to use Chaos as my main ability. I throw on Blind Rage because I'm getting 90% ability strength. That's great, right? But if I hover over Chaos, I don't see green numbers. Why? So none of the stats on Chaos is affected by strength. So the main stats on Chaos that really matter are efficiency, range, and duration. Efficiency, if you want positive, so let's say it's at 75 base, we can throw on a mod called Streamline, and we'll go from 75 to 52.5. Nice jump. You could go more efficiency if you want. I usually just like throw Streamline if I have a free slot on, but if I'm spamming Chaos, if you're spamming any ability, you want a nice amount of efficiency, because 75, you cast it twice, you spent 150 energy, right? 50 energy, cast it twice, you spent 100 energy. So now you got like a third cast for free just by throwing one mod on, right? Not always useful. For example, Aqua Blades has a high duration. It's not gonna be spammed much, so that 175 cost isn't that big of a deal. So in this case, I want high duration. Next up, we have range. Range essentially means the range of the ability. So let's look at Chaos again. Our Chaos radius is 25 meters, right? I think that on default is pretty good, but let's throw a mod called Overextended in and see what happens. So that goes from 25 to 47.5. That's a big jump. I think it's worth it for a mod slot to give me that big of a jump. Using a whole mod slot for that one slot, if 25 is good enough, like if you're playing in a small map, you don't need this much range. 30 meters is enough range for most like tiles. Once you get to the 40s, that's when it starts affecting enemies behind walls and like in other rooms. So I wouldn't go too crazy. Range is pretty self-explanatory, but let's say you throw range back in, right? Overextended, right? Let's look at Aqua Blades. Again, we see no number turn green. Aqua Blades has a fixed range. Range does not affect it. So throwing in more range thinking it helps all your abilities isn't really the case, and you have to be mindful of like what you are building for. Let's look at the last stat, and then I'll give you some tips and tricks on how to do certain stuff. So next up, we have strength. Strength is the simplest, I guess, to understand. So if you look at Chaos, the one we're using for every stat right now, if we throw on strength, nothing. So if you're doing a Chaos build, you do not want strength. It does nothing for you. And it's not just Chaos. There's tons of abilities you would assume care about strength, but don't. There's some abilities that care about duration, but once you change duration and you look at it, nothing changes, right? If you look at Absorb, our conversion percent went from 0.2 to 0.4. Pretty self-explanatory. Our Aqua Blades put in strength, we get a damage increase. Psychic Bolts, damage increase. Pretty easy, right? What about this mod up here, right? So that's an aura mod. Aura mods are essentially like stance mods on melees. If you throw one on, it'll increase your capacity. Usually they give you like a passive squad buff. For example, Steel Charge gives everyone in your squad plus 60 melee. Power Donation, you lose 30 strength, but your teammates gain 30 strength. Even if it's not something useful like Deadeye, I'm using like a melee build and I don't have anything else. Throw Deadeye to get more capacity. You want to put this in first when you do a build because it gets higher capacity. Steel Charge and Power Donation are like one of the unique ones that give 9 instead of 7. So when you put it into a slot that matches, it'll go from 9 to 18 or from 7 to 14 will double. So if I don't match, so I have a universal aura, but if this doesn't match, you'll still gain capacity, just not the full amount that you would want. So let's say Steel Charge, boom, we got 78 total capacity. That's really good. How do I figure out what my build needs? I throw on a continuity, an intensify, flow. I'll throw on a streamline, stretch. So all my stats now are positive, and then I look at like my stats and like, do I care about that stat being increased? For example, I want to do Chaos. I want to CC the whole map. Okay, I can go high duration and not spam it that much, so I probably don't need efficiency. Okay, take that out. Is it affected by strength? Let me take this out real fast. Oh, nothing changed. So that means strength doesn't affect Chaos. Take that out. Now we're left with flow, continuity, and stretch. Am I going to be spamming it? Not really, but how much energy do I have? 225. With flow, I'm at 566. That might be a comfier place to be at, so I probably just keep flow. Usually I put flow on most builds. Some frames don't need it. Some frames have alternate stuff you can do. And then the main ones for Chaos are stretch and continuity, range and duration. So, okay, I can just put more range, I can put more duration, and then boom, my Chaos is now at a 42 meter radius and 62 second duration. Yep, 69. So if I wanted to build just for Chaos, I can pop these in and then boom, I'm solid. I recommend, okay, I don't know if I recommend, but it's nice to build over for one ability sometimes. It's simpler to understand and some abilities are just that good, but it's also nice to understand how your frame works and how to balance these stats. I don't need 70-second duration. I can just recast the ability every 30 seconds. So I can afford to lose, boom, some duration. Okay, 37, that's fine. Recast, spending 75 energy every 35 seconds is not bad. Because if we had all the duration mods, we would have had 2 slots left. Now these 2 slots will have to be for survivability and for like any other ability I want to mod for. Let's say I want some strength. If I want some strength, boom, blind rage, and I have 1 slot left. This 1 slot will have to either deal with efficiency or my health, armor, shields, what have you, right? But that doesn't seem reasonable. So let's take this out. If we check out these 2 duration mods and only keep continuity, we now have 4 mods instead of the 2 mod slots. So now I can use 2 for survivability. I can throw like rolling guard, catalyzing shield, and then let's say I want to put some strength for my 4. I can then throw on something else. I can throw on transient fortitude. Okay, not transient fortitude, but I can throw on a blind rage, and I have 1 more slot left. Let's say I want to put something else on. Let's say I want rush. I'm doing a spy mission. I'm doing a capture mission. I want to run around a lot. Boom, you have it built just like that. I also have your 2 arcane slots. I wouldn't worry about this in the beginning, but some of these are really important. I recommend reading up on some of them. Some of them do really cool stuff. Aegis, you take damage, you regen your shields really fast. Once this activates, you can't die. You have Arcane Guardian. When you take damage, you gain extra 900 armor. If you're doing a health tank, this is perfect. Some of them make you immune to certain statuses. Some of them give you more strength. So read up on them. Some of them are really good. They're sorted out in stats and stuff. But yeah, it's pretty simple. As long as you follow, like you look at your abilities first, read the tooltip, the tips it gives you in the ability menu, these tips right here. But some of them are useful. It tells you like, oh, if you cast these 2 abilities together, it'll give you a buff and so on and so on. As long as you like put something in all of them to like figure out like, oh, this needs this needs that, you'll be able to understand your frame better. And yeah, if you have any questions, the wiki always has the stats you need. So if you go to like Nick's wiki, it will tell you like, oh, psychic bolts with like strength, duration, range, and efficiency. So if you have any questions, you always leave them in the comments, check the wiki, talk to me in stream, all that cool stuff. And yeah, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully it was informational, useful. Let me know what you think about this, and take care. Bye.